Okay, so last tutorial that we had for Unit 28, we looked at coding the HTML for a web page and how the HTML was just the basic building blocks for the website that we're making. We now need to look at the CSS for the website. This is the bit that we use to make our website look pretty and to add some interaction to our website as well. First thing we're going to want to do is reopen our page so that we can edit it. As soon as we save the page and we save it with the HTML file format, it creates it so that it will, if you double click, it will open straight in the browser. In order to edit the page, you need to right click, and then if you're using Notepad++, it should come up here. Otherwise, you are going to want to go to Open With and select the program that you are using if it does not come up as edit on its own. Right, so here is our code. Now, I've added a tag to the code that we did last time. And the tag that I've added is a div tag. It basically puts everything in the page into containers, and we can then use the containers to describe where on the page that container is going to sit. It's a division tag at the end of the day. So, div tag, angle bracket div, close angle bracket, and then close the div tag at the end of that block. And let's just do this one. So there's the start of that block. This block ends here. Now I have, so far, up to the end of this links section here, closed everything into the div tag. This next section, where I've got the image, you'll notice that I haven't closed the div tag and opened a new one between the end of that paragraph and the start of the paragraph that the image is contained in. The reason for that is I want to apply an effect with the image where this text will wrap around the image that is in there. So I've left the gap there, and I've got the div tag there and closed it here. So let's just save that. CSS. There are 3 types of CSS that we can use. And the types of CSS are the reason why it's actually called CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And the instructions that CSS gives cascades through from the 3 different types of CSS that we use. The first type of CSS, and the one that we're not going to worry about for this unit, is an external CSS. So it's a document that is separate to the HTML document. It ends in .css. And we would actually create a link to that document in the head tag. That is the first place that the formatting for the page is taken from. Anything that is in an external CSS sheet is applied across all of the pages that it is linked on. So where we've got, if we were looking at a multi-page site, so we had, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, we would control most of the elements on the pages with that CSS from an external sheet. The next one that we have is internal CSS. This sits in the head tag because although it affects the display, it is not something that is visible on the website, and it controls aspects that are only on that page. So it will overwrite any instructions by the external CSS. So anything that we need to change or make look different on that one page to any of the other pages, if we were doing a multi-page website, would go as an in-page or an internal CSS. The final CSS, and the last stage in the cascade through the waterfall, is the inline CSS, and that only applies to the tags that we put it into. So let's have a look and see how this works and what this actually means. So we're going to start off with an internal CSS. So we want to be in the head tags, and the tag for putting the CSS in is a style tag. Leave yourself some space and close the style. Always double check that you've got arrowheads and you haven't hit the wrong buttons and your arrowheads are all pointing the right way. Otherwise, your text will turn red or will turn a different color, and it will show you that you have an error. Usually it will turn red, or Visual Studio, it may highlight in a different color to say that there is an error at that place. So let's start off, let's do background. Now the syntax of CSS is slightly different to the syntax of HTML. And as we are now coding in CSS, we now switch the way we are working. So the first thing we want to affect is we want the body tag. So we put body, doesn't have any brackets around it, and then the code for the CSS that we put in sits in a pair of curly brackets. And I'm going to indent this so that we can see that this is CSS code by looking at it and looking at it relatively quickly. Now, color, remembering that we're using American spellings, is the color of the text. So I'm going to change the color of my text. I'm going to change it to white. Notice when I've done that, I've put the word of what I want to change. So I want to change the color. Now, color does relate to text. We will look at changing the background color in a second. I've then put a colon, which is the double dots. I've written the name of the color. I want it white. And I've put a semicolon. You can use named colors. You can also use RGB colors, and you can use hexadecimal colors. Name colors work fine, so long as you know what the names are. But there are plenty of hexadecimal color charts if you search for one on the internet. So I'll show you a hexadecimal color as the next one. So let's do the background color. And we need to do it background dash color. So background dash color. But what language I was coding in for a moment there. Sorry guys. Colon. Now, let's say I want this to be a dark blue. Hexadecimal still works in red, green, blue across the code. Only it uses a mixture of numbers and letters. Starts off with zeros being the darkest. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros. That will give me black. It goes up to 9 in terms of numbers. 6 nines. That will give you a grey. It then switches to letters. Letters go from A to F. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letter Fs, and that will give you white. You can then use combinations. So if I wanted, say, a blue, I can go 0, 0, 0, 0, FF, and that will give me a true blue colour. And what do I mean by true blue? Let's save this, skip to our page, and hit the refresh button. That is true blue. It is excessively bright. So far, every colour that I've shown you in hexadecimal, that should have a semicolon at the end of it. That is bad practice on my part there. So let's put my semicolon in. Do remember your semicolons. It is good practice, and if you forget them, it can cause problems with native code. As I don't have any CSS under that at the moment, it worked. The second I add more CSS to this body tag, it will stop working. So here is my background colour. So far, every colour we've used has had double repetitions of the same letters. If you have that, you can condense it down to just the 3. If I save that, there shouldn't be, when I refresh that page, any difference. And that little flicker, that's me refreshing the page. However, you can also do something slightly different. And let's have, say, 6. So I have absolutely no idea what colour this is going to come out at. Let's save it and find out. That is a very interesting shade of green. So you can mix it up and get very specific colours. What you can also do is type in hex color chart, and there is a myriad of pictures using hexadecimal codes. You will get much greater range of colors using things like the hexadecimal code. There we go. There's, when it finishes loading, there's a pretty good picture which shows all of the repeated number codes. Doesn't show the codes where you can get a mix. There is somewhere on the web a hexadecimal color picker at the W3 schools. So again, you'll be able to actually go in and create your own custom color using some of those tools. For the purposes of this, I'm going to go for a nice dark grey. So let's have 3, 3, and 3. So if I save that, go back to the web page we've been making, and now I have a nice dark grey with white text. So that's controlled some of the body tag and some of the elements of that. So let's have a look at some of the other elements that we've got. Let's do the table. So let's start with the table tag itself. And we need to do this in a couple of little sets. Leave myself some space and tab that in. So table, first thing you're going to want is a border. Now there's a number of ways that we can set the border. We could do every single one of these with the dashes individually. That's going to take an awful long time to code. So what we do is we cheat. Border, colon, and then let's have it 3 pixels and dotted. And that should give us, if I've done this right from memory, a dotted border around our table. That's good. That's good to have. Doesn't give us the lines inside the table. We need to set that slightly differently. So let's get the TD tag and set ourselves some CSS on this. Let's start with the same thing, and this time we'll have a border of 1 pixel and solid. Let's see what that looks like when we go back and we refresh. So now our table's got its own border around it with the dots, and we can see each of the individual cells from the TD tag with the border there. What we might want to do, because that table is very small, what we might want to do is set the width of the table, and let's set it to 50%, shall we? And let's just see what that does. There we go, that's slightly easier to read. And it takes up slightly more of the page. Now we're not going to worry about positioning the table at the moment. We're going to do that with a different type of control, which we will look at in a minute. Excuse me. Which we'll look at in a minute. So that's block code for CSS, and that's controlling gross tags. In fact, let's do something with the image tag in this as well. So image, let's put those returns in and actually press the buttons properly. And in this one, I'm going to set the height of the image to 100 pixels. As we know from doing graphics unit, 100 pixels is relatively small. This is a good thing. And if I save that and I refresh that, my picture is now quite small. What I'm also going to do with this is I'm going to add a float to it. And I'm going to float this to the right of the page. So let's save that. And now my horses are floating over on this right hand side. Don't worry about the fact that it's tiny and it's all the way over there. We will fix that in a little bit. What I am going to do now is I'm going to set a specific attribute. And for this, I'm going to make the picture do something when we put the mouse over it. So I'm going to do img :hover, and in this hover, I'm going to change the height issues pressing shift at the moment. I'm going to change the height. I'm going to change the height to 300 pixels. Let's refresh that, and when I put my mouse over it, it changes. We can make the change, I didn't want to do that, we can make the change a lot smoother, and this is where the W3 schools comes in. So if we look at, say, style images, it's not, well, there is plenty of stuff under style images that we can use. We can use borders, we can put thumbnails as links, we can make it responsive by using percentages instead of absolute heights. Yes, just a note, the difference between percentages and absolute heights by using pixels. You don't want that one, we want that one then. Okay, I've actually lost the code. That bit. So pixels is an absolute size. Sorry, I got completely lost for a moment there. Pixels is absolute size. And percentages will change depending on the screen size. So we've used a percentage for the table, and we've used an absolute size for the image. So if I make my browser off full screen, notice the size of the image is staying the same. The size of the table is adapting with the page. It's by using percentages that we are able to get a responsive layout that will resize depending on the parameters of the screen size that the user is using. And I have literally forgotten how to make it do the smooth transform. Pretty sure it should just be transform scale. I'm sure it should just be transform and scale. Let's try it and see what happens. Okay, we'll come back to that once I've remembered how to do it. Right, one thing that I am going to do, because at the moment all we can see is that the horse picture is over on the side, so I'm going to move the picture of my horse, and I'm actually going to put it above the text so that this effect will actually have more of an impact, and you'll be able to see better what this is actually doing by having the image floating. Maybe I put it in place. So now, especially when I come out of full screen, you can see the text wraps around my picture. Nope, that wasn't it either. See, the text wraps around my picture. Whereas you couldn't really see that before because it was down in this bottom corner. By moving it above the text, I can now float my picture over on the right, and it will the text will then wrap around it. And I'm going to take that out for now. I will do an add-on to this video showing some of the CSS tricks for stuff like that at a later date. Also known as when I've actually remembered. But that does show, although I haven't been able to show you the smooth transition, what that does show is things like the hover control that can change what happens when we put our mouse over a particular element. We can also do this to style links. So let's say our A tag, and let's close the CSS for the A tag. Nope, that's not the up arrow. Let's try again. And let's indent that. So let's say for our A tag, I want the color American spelling, no U. And I want the color for the text to be white on the main link. And then I can put hover. That shouldn't be an at, that should be a colon. Hover. And there is my curved brackets. And I I want to say the color. I will keep spelling that the English spelling. And let's have the text turn, let's just have the text turn blue when we put the mouse over it. Because we can also have visited links, assuming this still works in CSS3, I've got to be honest, I haven't tried it. So this visited is an experiment. And let's change the color of that to red. That one may not work, but we'll have a try. Theoretically, same as links when you visit them will change from blue to purple. This should change our visited links to red after we've visited them. Well, that worked. I've been on both of these pages, but for some reason my hover is not working. Which is interesting. So let's add a third link in, just so that we can see everything else. And I'm going to create a page that doesn't exist to do this. Ref equals that will do. /a. So that's a web page that probably exists somewhere in the world, but I haven't been to it. So when I refresh, that is now white. And when I hover over it, unlike the visited links, it turns blue. And blue is not a good color, so I'm going to change that blue and I'm going to change it to yellow, which for some reason is the color I thought I typed even though I typed blue. Now I'm going to try something. Visited color yellow, this bit. So we can stack these commands as well, and it can get quite complicated doing it this way. I'm just wanting to test this to see if this will fix our bit where that turns yellow for our visited links. So you've got your A's, you've got your hovering on the A tags, you can set the color so that it's different for it being visited, and you can set a hover color so that it will still turn yellow even when the link has been visited. That is as complicated as we're getting on building tags into each other like this. Right, now we need to look at controlling the actual layout of the page. We've put all of these in div tags, but what we need to do now is we need to put in something that will control the actual layout on the page. That's not a particularly interesting page to look at the moment. So we have two ways that we can do this. We can use a class and we can use an ID with the class. So it doesn't really matter which way you do it, to be honest. You can do it any which way.
We've got some apple, walnut and ginger chutney off Ali.
We can do it in two ways. We can do it as an ID and we can do it as a class. They do have specific uses. For the purposes of this, it's not too much of an issue which way we do it. So, because we are going to want to be looking at controlling div tags. We can start off with a nice generic div. Curve brackets, and let's start off with width, the right spelling, at 100%. And that will set every div tag to start with to stretch all the way across the page. Now we're going to set up our IDs. So a dot in the CSS tells you an ID, and we're going to call this one, let's call it link column. Let's call this one link column. Lock it in and say we want the width of this to be 30% of our page, making sure you put your semicolons at the end of each line. So we can leave these divs, these top two, we want those to stay as they are. This one, we want to add in an ID equals with our speech marks, and we want link column in there. And let's also have an ID of content. So dot content, and in that, let's say we want to set the width, and we want to set the width to 60%. I'm also going to do, so we can see what is actually happening, is I'm going to add a border to these divs that I'm adding these to. So we will add a 3 pixel border, both of these. Remembering to put the border in first would probably be helpful. And 3 pixels for that. And then in this main div tag that we've got here, I'm going to add in ID equals with the speech marks because we're in HTML for this, and matching the cases, content. Save that, and this is where I find out that I've set classes and not IDs usually. Okay, let's try changing that to class, and that one's class. There we go. So now we can see that the size, at least of this bit, has changed. Although, strangely, it hasn't done what I was expecting it to do. And if that's because I've got this set to 100%. So let's take that out for a minute. No, it's because I've done something else. My border hasn't shown up either, which might be half the problem. But it has moved over. And it has gotten smaller, so the width has worked for it. And if I turn this down to 10%, and we refresh that, now we can see that bit there. Oh, I know why we can't see the border. I haven't told it to give it a solid border. That would help. If I do that, now we can see the border. So we can see where those are. you'll notice they are very close together. That's because we need to set a margin. Now margin, I stop doing capitals, goes all the way around. And we can set each margin to its own setting. We can also just set the margin itself, and let's set this margin around the link column to 10 pixels. And if I come back to this and we refresh, you can see that that has now moved in and there is a gap. So that has now moved that over. Now where I've got the resize on the image is not staying within the confines of that div box. The div box is not expanding. But on a normal page, you would expect to have maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs going down in that. So I will do an add-on to this video at some point because this isn't behaving the way it's supposed to with that up next to that. I am wondering whether... Nope, don't want to do that. I'm just going to quickly test something. Well, there is one issue there. Now, theoretically, having that extra tag hasn't made much of an impact. So what I am going to try is just taking these paragraph tags out. It shouldn't be those causing the issue, but let's just test it. And this testing is what you need to be doing as you are working. Make sure that your code is actually working. So it wasn't that. Let's go backwards and put those back in, apart from no, let's put the closed paragraph tag back in here. As apparently I didn't actually move that tag. Which is slightly bizarre. Right, so let's look at our table. So that is in-page CSS. Now you can imagine if you were doing this on a multi-page site and controlling everything, it would get very long, which is why we would use an external style sheet to control most of the look and only change bits that we need to change on the page, usually with the internal style sheet, which is the bit that we've just been doing. What we do still need to look at is we need to look at controlling things inline CSS with inline CSS. So for that, TR, I'm going to put this across this row, and I'm going to do style. In this case, because we're working in the HTML, it's style equals speech marks. And let's do background dash color, and we press the right keys. Background dash color, and because this is the header, I'm going to do the background color, set it to white, and then color, and set that to black. So let's just see if that does work. There we go. So we've now got a white going across for our title, and we've got black or no color in our second row. We can also control individual cells. So if we do style here equals, not that far back, and let's say because this is the breed, or just because I need to do an example, we can set the style for this specific TD tag, in fact, let's do the border. This. So border, and let's set the border to 3 pixels, which is going to look absolutely horrible. The meow is Smokey coming back in, if you can hear her. And let's make it 3 pixels, and let's do ridge. That. Actually, let's not do ridge, let's do dash. Let's do a dash border for that one. So I save that. Now remember, we've already styled the border for the TD tags. That's how we've got the white lines around each cell. And that is how inline CSS overwrites internal CSS. And it's exactly the same for internal CSS overwriting external CSS. And once I have worked out quite why I haven't got this bit up here where it should be, I will do an add-on to this video. But that is the basics for the moment. As I say, second video to come soon.